This is the day the Lord has made. We will be glad and rejoice in it. Obviously, the Lord made every day, but the Lord's day is His in a special sense, and what an honor it is to bow before His throne in worship. If you're not a child of God, we're especially thankful for your presence and your desire to be here. We would love to put you into Christ today in baptism as you repent of sins, having believed in Jesus, confessing your Lord. That makes you a candidate then for being immersed in water. Perhaps as a child of God, you just need prayers of the church for encouragement, for forgiveness. Again, we're here to help and not hurt anybody. And if we can help, assist in any of those ways, please let us know. As Adam has mentioned, we're not having PowerPoint today. Our data projector did breathe its last Sunday. It gave up the ghost. We actually had that projector for 15 years. Got it in 2007. So if you can have a piece of electronics to last 15 years, you've gotten your money's worth. And so we got our money's worth out of that. We'll be in the process of researching and getting another one. I told Adam we could get a projector. You can actually mount them right there with a screen right there. The problem is whoever gets in the attic has to go all the way to the end instead of stopping right there. And if you've ever been up in that attic, and I've been all the way here, and I turn around and look back that way, it looks like it's a mile. And then your mind starts playing tricks. Am I actually going to make it back, all the way back? And then I think I'll just kick my way through the ceiling, and we can repair the ceiling. So Michael probably knows what I'm talking about, but your mind, am I going to make it back? Am I going to make it back? But anyway, we'll be working on that, and hopefully in the next couple of weeks we'll have that replaced with another one and get back to using our PowerPoint once again. But we're going to do this as we've been doing the old-fashioned way. As Adam has helped you, I'll try to do my best. Psalm 49 is where we want to open our Bibles. Whether we put these verses on the screen or not, I always find it helpful to have a copy of the Bible open. Sometimes old Wayne will put a verse on the screen wrong anyway, and what's in the Bible is not wrong. So we'll be going verse by verse. Please find your copy of the Old Testament and open that to Psalm 49. We are talking about this morning the poverty of prosperity. That's how we caption these verses, the poverty of prosperity. And at the outset, that title is what we call a paradox, P-A-R-A-D-O-X, a paradox. And a paradox is a figure of language that seems to contradict itself, a seeming self-contradictory statement. We use paradoxes all the time in life and may not even realize that's what they're called, but you've heard them, you've used them. Less is more. Now that statement seems to contradict itself, but there's a lot of truth in that. It depends on how you look at it. The beginning of the end is another. If you don't risk anything, you risk everything. Youth is wasted on the young. Some say, the more you give, the more you get. Well, again, that seems to contradict itself, but when you look at it from that standpoint, it doesn't. And now the poverty of prosperity. How can a man who's prospering be poor, you ask? That seems to contradict itself, but again, it's all a matter of perspective, as Adam pointed out in his last lesson. We look at this, and again, these are lessons that are reminders to us. We live in a world that is obsessed with riches. We live in a world that is obsessed with riches. I don't think we're exaggerating when we make that point that our world has an obsession with money and wealth and things of that nature. We hear people say the person who dies with the most toys is the person who wins. That's an obsession with worldly things. That's worldly thinking. That is foolish thinking. And that is not how God thinks nor how God's people think. So looking at Psalm 49, the poverty of prosperity, Psalm 49 answers the question, why live for that which you cannot keep? Why live for that which you cannot keep? Riches are limited to this life. They're not beyond this world. We're going to leave this world. And the Bible is plain that we enter this world with nothing, and we will exit this world in the same way with absolutely nothing. It is the height of folly then to live only for what this world has to offer, since we're going to leave everything in this world one day behind. So let's let God reinforce that point now in Psalm 49. We don't know much about it. We don't know much about the background. Sometimes the superscription helps, sometimes not a lot there. Here, there's not a lot there. We're simply told in that tiny print, this is to the chief musician, a psalm for the sons of Korah, or a psalm of the sons of Korah. And other than that, that's about all we know of the background. But there's no mistaking the thrust of the poverty of prosperity. We're going to divide these 20 verses into 3 sections. They all begin with the letter C. The call, verses 1 through 4. The counsel, that's C-O-U-N-S-E-L, verses 5 through 15. And the caution, verses 16 through 20. And we'll go back and get those one at a time. Verses 1 to 4 sort of introduce verses 5 through 20. This is the call. And first of all, it is the call to all, no matter one's status in life. Psalm 49, verse 1. Hear this, all you people. Hear this, everybody. Everybody listen up, is what he's saying. Give ear, all you inhabitants of the world. Now, the next verse sort of gives the scope of everybody. This is who I'm talking about, and it's inclusive of verse 2, the low and the high, the rich and the poor together. All social levels are addressed. All economic levels are addressed. From the low, this would be plain, ordinary folks like me and like you, I would assume. From the low to the high, kings and presidents and rulers and CEOs and people of that nature. From the low to the high, and everybody in between, from the rich and the poor, to those with deep pockets and to those who don't have any pockets at all. Everybody is admonished to listen to the words of Psalm 49. And the cry of wisdom, verses 3 and 4. Addressed to everybody, to all, and the cry of wisdom. Verse 3, my mouth shall speak of wisdom. The meditation of my heart shall be of understanding. I will incline mine ear to a parable. I will disclose my riddle upon the harp. And so the writer speaking words of wisdom, of course, Psalm 49 is coming from the throne of God in heaven, and anything that proceeds from the mouth or mind of God is inspired and therefore is wise and has understanding. God has the proper perspective on everything, including money, including riches, including wealth, and what one is to do with that. Notice that Jesus often taught in parables, and this writer mentions the use of parable. I would incline mine ear to a parable, verse 4. And the parable is simply an illustration. Jesus would take something that everybody was familiar with, and then he would lay beside that familiar truth a spiritual truth and illustrate the spiritual truth by what everybody already knew. That's the approach the psalmist is taking in Psalm 40, in Psalm 49. And again, he presents this as a song. And oftentimes songs were used to teach truths. We learned our ABCs in school, right? By that song, A, B, C, D. I'm not going to sing it. We learned the apostles' names by a song. So singing is a great memory aid. And that's, again, what the writer is saying here. So verses 1 to 4 of the call, really just an introduction. Everybody listen up is what he's saying. Now verses 5 to 15, the counsel, that's C-O-U-N-S-E-L. C-O-U-N-C-I-L is a gathering of people, a group of people. C-O-U-N-S-E-L is advice, and that's the word here. The counsel is, the admonition is, fear not the ungodly, verses 5 through 14. Don't be afraid of the ungodly. First of all, because they cannot redeem themselves. Don't fear the ungodly, they cannot redeem themselves. Verse 5. Wherefore, why should I fear in the days of evil, when the iniquity of my heels shall surround me? or compass me about. It was the case in Bible times that rich people often would oppress poor people in a very real way. In fact, that's how many of them became rich to start with, because of their oppression of the poor, taking advantage of the poor, and so forth. The picturesque language he uses here of iniquity at his heels, nipping at him as a dog would. But here, oppressors hound his very steps. Don't be afraid, he says, verse 6. They trust in their wealth. They trust in their wealth and boast themselves in the multitude of their riches. Don't fear these. You see, they have a misplaced faith. Their trust is in their money, in their riches, as if riches is the answer to everything. They brag about their wealth. You've seen Charles Dickens, Scrooge, there in his office in the dim light. He was such a Scrooge he wouldn't light the office very much, but with just a dim lamp, and he would sit there and count his coins, and count his coins, and count his coins. That's the picture that comes to my mind here. Counting coins, bragging to others about how much they have. Big bank accounts, stocks, bonds, portfolios today, and the like. In their mind, they're way up here. And us lowly people, we're way down here. And they're not ashamed to put us in our place, so they say. And we're not worthy really to be in their presence, so they think. Someone well said that money makes the worst master. Money makes the worst master, because money is so fleeting and money is so deceitful, and some let money and their wealth go to their heads. That's what he's talking about here. Verse 7. None of them can by any means, don't fear these people, because none of them can by any means redeem his brother, nor give to God a ransom for him. This is the familiar phrase, there are things money cannot buy. There are some things that money cannot buy. And the psalmist is saying that no amount of money can redeem a soul. No amount of wealth, riches, can purchase forgiveness and salvation. The Bible says the purchase price that God paid to redeem our souls was the blood of his Son. 1 Peter chapter 1, verses 18 and 19. No amount of money could do that, only the blood of Christ. So again, verse 7, none of them can by any means ransom his brother, nor give to God a ransom for him. Money is limited. Things money cannot buy. I know you've heard the following. Money can buy entertainment, but money cannot buy happiness. Money can buy food, but money cannot buy an appetite. Money can buy medicine, but money cannot buy health. Money can buy a house, but money cannot buy a family. Money can buy quietness, but money cannot buy peace. Money can buy people, but money can never buy friends. Money can buy glasses, but money cannot buy eyesight. And money can buy a Bible, but money cannot buy salvation. There are things that money cannot buy, and the rich evidently don't realize that. Their focus is misplaced. Verse 8, yes, the redemption of their soul is precious. So stop striving for that. Stop striving to take care of the soul's needs with temporal blessings. We know this also. Some of the unhappiest people you will meet on this planet are some of the richest people you will meet. Some of the unhappiest people are some of the wealthiest people. There are those who, through some means, struck it rich and came into money. And they look back on that and rue the day it ever happened. They'll say, you know, I was better off before I won the lottery. I was better off before I received the inheritance. That money changed me, and not for the better. Some think they would love to trade places with the rich. But then you look at the lifestyle of many who are wealthy, cannot hold a marriage together. In fact, in multiple marriages, family problems to boot. Yes, have a wonderful mansion, the finest cars, expensive toys. But again, inner turmoil inside the walls of what they call home. Verse 9. That he should still live forever and not see corruption. That is, all the money in the world will not allow you to live forever. All the money in the world won't keep you from the grave. All the money in the world will not stop the body from turning to dust. Don't fear the rich. Don't fear the rich. Don't fear the ungodly. They cannot redeem themselves. They cannot save themselves with their wealth. Second, don't fear the rich because they cannot hold on to their wealth forever. And the psalmist is going to repeat that throughout these verses. Verses 10 through 12. They cannot hold on to wealth forever. Verse 10. For he sees that the wise men die. Likewise the fool and the senseless persons perish and leave their wealth to others. What advantage, he's asking, do the rich have in this world? They will experience death just like the poor man. We're sometimes deceived into thinking that riches are able to prevent the inevitable. But that well-known proverb still holds true. There are two things that are certain in life, death and taxes, and you cannot escape either, rich or poor. And yet the world continues to try to cheat death. There are some, and we mentioned this before, who think that they're going to, when they near death, they'll put their bodies on ice. And then their bodies will be in a frozen state. And then years pass and technology develops to the point where the bodies are thawed and they come back to life again. Because that's their desire not to leave this world, nor the things in this world behind. So why trust, though, in riches when death is assured to the rich as it is to the poor? There's no advantage to the rich concerning death. Now, their bodies may be placed in an expensive mausoleum. Their bodies may be placed in the best casket of money that money can buy, but they're still dead. They're just as dead as the fellow placed in a pine box. They're still dead. There's no difference between the two. And further, verse 10 says they leave their wealth to others. Every cent they have ever made is left to others. One day the house I live in will be somebody else's house. The truck that I drive will be somebody else's truck. It's going to be left to others. People attended the funeral of a rich man. A couple of fellows were standing by the casket. One asked the other, "Wonder how much he left behind?" And the other fellow wisely said, "He left it all. He left it all." No matter what we own, one day it will be somebody else's. Don't fear the rich, verse 11. Now their inward thought is that their houses are going to last forever, and their dwelling places to all generations. In fact, they call their lands after their own names. Well, this is so-and-so's ranch. This is so-and-so's plantation. And I'm going to pass this down. I may not live forever, but I'm going to pass this down to my posterity from generation to generation. And my name won't be forgotten. But they die. And a lot of times that plantation, that mansion, falls out of the family's hands. And except for the family, these people are basically forgotten, though they don't think so in this life. Don't fear these. Verse 12. Nevertheless, man being in honor remains not. He is like the beasts that perish. It is a fact of life. One fact of life is death. Death to all living organisms, all living creatures. No matter how long they live, they're going to die. In studying for this lesson, I asked myself the question, I wonder what is the oldest living organism on the planet? And the answer is not a human being by a long shot, and not an animal either. The oldest living organism on earth today is a tree. A bristlecone pine tree in southeast California's White Mountains is said to be 4,841 years old. And there's a picture of that, and you can tell it is an old, old tree. It's not going to last forever either. It's going to come to an end also. So don't put that idea on the back burners, the idea we're not going to remain forever. Not the rich, not the poor, not anybody. But speaking of the rich, verses 13 and 14, they also will die. Like the beasts die, verse 12, they also will die. 13. This their way is their folly, yet their posterity amend what they say. You'll live forever, or you'll pass on your wealth forever. But, verse 14, like sheep they are laid in the grave. Death shall feed on them, and the upright shall have dominion over them in the morning, and their beauty shall consume in the grave from their dwelling. Reminds us of the old saying that death is no respecter of persons. Death is no respecter of persons. The mortality rate of human beings is 100%. These statistics on death are very impressive. 1 out of 1 dies. 1 out of 1. This includes people with no money, as well as people with all the money in the world. In verse 14, commentators admit is a bit difficult to understand and maybe translate, but the idea seems to be that death is pictured or likened to a shepherd watching over us, waiting its turn to come for us, to, in a sense, take us by the hand and lead us to the grave. And one by one, the shepherd of death will come for each of us until then God brings about the resurrection. Instead of fearing the rich or envying the rich, verse 15, focus upon the God of life. But God will redeem my soul from the power of the grave, for he shall receive me. Again, all will die, the rich and the poor. But the Bible teaches that the poor, or at least the righteous, whether rich or poor, not all rich people are wicked. We're not implying that. But the righteous do have an advantage at death. Called in the book of Luke the death of the rich man and Lazarus. That Lazarus was carried by the angels to Abraham's bosom. Here the psalmist speaks of, God shall receive my soul. Now the rich man, he just wound up in torments, being in torment. But it seems that the righteous have special care given them at their death, and the help even of angels. So don't envy the rich. Don't fear the rich. And then finally the caution, verses 16 through 20. Psalm 49, 16 through 20, we're talking about the poverty of prosperity. Hear words of the wise. 16. Again, emphasizing the rich will leave it all. In fact, we all will leave it all. Be not thou afraid when one is made rich, when the glory of his house is increased. We've seen that. We've seen people prosper, and it's sometimes hard not to envy those individuals. And if they earned their living in a godly way, more power to them. Nothing at all wrong with that. On the other hand, if they didn't, well, again, there are the people not to envy, not to be afraid of. Because, verse 17, for when he dies, he shall carry nothing away. Notice this. We've been talking about not taking money or wealth with him, but notice he's not even going to take his glory. His glory shall not descend after him. Folks in this life admired him, patted him on the back, looked up to him, gave him all sorts of accolades. He had power and position and prosperity. But he left God out of his life. His glory was limited to this life. The psalmist says, not only will his wealth not follow him, his glory is not going to follow him either. That's going to be left behind too. The rich will leave it all. Notice verses 18 and 19, their arrogance in this life will not save them in the next. Though while he lived, he blessed his soul. I'm a self-made man. Pats himself on the back. What a great person I am. Again, he blessed his soul in this life, and men praised him in this life when thou doest well to thyself. But verse 19, he's going to die. He's going to go to the generation of his fathers. They shall never see light. That is the idea, evidently, of eternal condemnation, because not of being rich, but because of not being rich where it mattered, not being rich in God, not giving God the glory and the credit and the praise. Just arrogant people in this life, again, not giving God the credit for their blessings. And then verse 20, their ultimate demise, D-E-M-I-S-E, their ultimate demise. Man that is in honor and understands not. So descriptive of a whole lot of men and women, by the way, not limited to man, this is mankind. Man who receives honor but doesn't understand the thrust of words of this psalm, that this life is so fleeting and you've got to leave it all behind anyway. If you don't understand that, you're just like animals that die. You're no better off than they are if you don't learn the lessons of life in life. Which brings us to, and that's our concluding, one of our concluding points actually goes to verse 20. The animals live for this world alone. That's all they have, is this world. That's all they have. That's all they know. They don't know anything about a hereafter. They're not destined for a hereafter. No part of an animal is eternal. They don't have a soul. They're not made in God's image, but we are. So the animals live for this world alone, but you know the same is true for anybody who lives for wealth. Who lives only for wealth, they're really living for this world alone. You may know people in life like this. If not, you can look back in history and just pick out so many examples of people who live for this world alone. I'm going to close with one. Probably in school you had to read a novel he wrote, The Old Man and the Sea. Ernest Hemingway. People admired Ernest Hemingway. He lived a full life. He lived that life with gusto, I guess you might say. By age 19, he was decorated for heroism in World War I. His first novel, The Sun Also Rises, was published when he was only 27. He was a war correspondent in World War II, known for his writing ability, known for his courage in battle. He was a hero of a lot of folks. Hemingway won both the Pulitzer Prize and the Nobel Prize. Very few people have won both. He was a big game hunter, a deep sea fisherman, a bullfighting enthusiast. It is said he experienced enough danger and adventure for several lifetimes. People looked up to him. People admired him. But they didn't take a closer look. He was a man who drank heavily. He was a man who could not hold marriages together. He was a man, after a long bout with depression, took his own life in 1961. He guzzled down everything the world has to offer. And yet look at the end. The poverty of prosperity. Looking at it from that perspective, the title makes a lot of sense. Folks, where our heart is now is where our eternity is going to be then. Where our heart is now is where our eternity is going to be then. No wonder the Lord says, where your treasure is, there will your heart be also. I know that we're laying up treasures in heaven. The Lord says, don't have to worry about thieves there. Don't have to worry about rust there. Don't have to worry about moth or corruption there. Let's make sure that our treasure is in heaven. Now we know that wealth is a matter of perspective. Sometimes I look at my life and think that I'm the richest man on the planet. Not rich per se in material things, though God has blessed us abundantly, but blessed so many ways in other ways that really count. And so we may be rich in wealth, we may be poor in wealth, but if we're Christians, we're rich where it counts. If you need to respond this morning, come as we stand and as we sing.